is, and guys, this is always a problem. You've seen that throughout the year, that Americans sometimes have a hard time understanding other cultures. You saw it in World War II with the Japanese, okay? You saw it after World War II in Vietnam, okay? At this point right here, you saw it in 1901 in the Philippines. At this point right here, white America never understood that you can't take 10,000 years of nomadic existence and make them farmers overnight, especially in the West, because that land is not conducive to farming. That's why the sod busters had such a hard time, okay? So they went in, and the first thing they did was they broke up the reservations. That's important. That's important. They broke up the reservations. Native Americans had no concept of private ownership of land. None. The reservation to them, because it included the tribe, was their world. When you break up the reservations, you break up the tribe. So the biggest thing that the Dawes Act did was it destroyed their cultural identity. They are no longer nomadic Indians hunting buffalo. They got to learn how to be white farmers. That's the biggest thing. So one thing to put down about the Dawes Act, it's important to remember that this is a cultural attack. This is a cultural attack without firing a shot. They're changing their culture. Okay? You're going to not be Indian. You're not going to sit here and do what you've done over a course of 10,000 years. You're the best cavalry in the world. You hunt, you fight, you live on horseback, and we're taking that all away from you. Now you're going to learn to be a farmer. And we're going to try to make you be a farmer in a land where white people can't even farm because the soil stinks so bad. Okay? So this is what's decimating to them about it. It's going to rob them of their native language, of their religion, of everything to them that smells like Indian will be against the law. Okay? They have to learn how to farm these individual tracts. So the biggest thing about the Dawes Act to remember, it robs them of their cultural identity because it robs them of the tribe, of the reservation. This is why it's important. If you fast forward to the New Deal, Roosevelt will overturn this. He'll pass something called the Indian Reorganization Act, which will put the tribe and the provision back together. Okay? Wounded Knee is the end of the Indian Wars. If you noticed in one of the last, I think the reading before this, they talked about Indians going back and reseizing Wounded Knee in 1972. Okay, Wounded Knee is holy ground to Native Americans, all of them, because of what happened there in 1890. Okay, this is what you need to know, and this is important. When Indians were when the reservations were destroyed by the Dawes Act, and they were put on individual plots of land, they had lost. I mean, a lot of them just died. They said, that's it, we can't be Indians anymore. They had lost all hope. When people become that desperate, okay, and there's nothing else, they turn to faith. Everybody does. Everybody in the world does. When you have nothing else, you have to depend on something that you believe in, okay? And these people, of course, they believed in the Great Spirit, okay? An Indian priest, a Paiute priest named Wovoka, came out of the Utah territory and was going all throughout these areas where these individual plots of land were. And he was saying, I'm the Messiah. I've had visions from the Great Spirit. And this is what's going to happen. Go ahead and bear this torture for right now. It's coming to an end. And the promise he made is he has seen visions where the ground will erupt. Okay? And when it turns and folds like this, the green pastures will be back. The buffalo will be back. All the dead ancestors will be back. And the white men will be nowhere in sight. In other words, he's talking about the resurrection. Okay? His message was somewhat akin to the Christian message. Christ is going to come again. Wovoka is saying that the buffalo are going to come again. We'll be Indians again. Just hang on there. Fight for it. Guys, listen carefully because this is a cool thing. There's a whole lot of George Kennan in this. If you think about the X article, when people are desperate and poor, something appeals to them. It was communism when he wrote that, okay? In the 1990s and 2000s, people in the Middle East looked to radical Islam. Indians looked to Wovoka. He's the only hope they had to pervert themselves. And that's why that thing about the X article is so important. You can invoke it different times throughout history. The ghost dance was the religion that Wovoka preached. Okay? You go out there, and God, remember I showed you the pictures of those guys hanging from those poles, by those leather tongs and things like that? Okay? The pain that induced made them hallucinate. And when they did, that's when they received their vision quest. This is what the Great Spirit wants you to do. You are to go out tomorrow and die in combat. Okay? But if you do this, that means you'll live with the Great Spirit. Guys, it sounds a lot like ISIS. It sounds a lot like radical Islam. If you go sit there and blow yourself up and take the infidel with you, you'll live in heaven with the 40 virgins. It's weird how some of these religious beliefs are very similar, and they're coming from cultural groups that are years and miles apart. It tells you something basic about the human spirit. Okay? The U.S. Army went out to put a stop to the ghost dance. It scared the crap out of home settlers. The last group of Indians that came in, okay, were told to meet by the Army at Wounded Knee, South Dakota. Okay? The chief's name was Bigfoot. He brought his Indians in. This is in March, and it's freezing cold up there. This is the one where they lined the Indians up to surrender their weapons. And there was one Indian who was deaf. And when the Army sergeant tried to get his weapon from him, the Indian resisted him. And they wrestled over the weapon. It fell on the ground and discharged. When it did, the Army opened up and killed him. Okay? That's the massacre at Wounded Knee. Okay? It is the last violent Indian resistance in American history. There have been no more Indian wars since. This is the one where we showed you guys those pictures of all those stiff dead bodies laying around. The body was so cold the bodies didn't thaw out in time. They couldn't bury them until they thawed out. It was pretty bad. So again, what you have when you talk about Native Americans is a trend. There are a lot of commonalities here, okay? Land, land, land. Whites move west, Indians are moving west with them. This is what Frederick Jackson Turner was talking about in the Frontier Thesis. That if you're white and you move into the frontier, you're going to come into contact with them. And you better be tough enough for it. And whatever it is inside the American spirit that makes them able to fight off people who've been living on that land for 10,000 years, that's what makes American who they are. That was kind of the essence of the Frontier Thesis. Okay? Is everybody good so far? Okay, almost finished. Okay? The 1900s. All right? Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal. It's alarming to him that the number of Native Americans has shrunk. I think the 1930 census had them down around 125,000, which is getting dangerously close to extinction. Okay? So he sent people out, sent a man named John Collier, who went out there and said, okay, how can we reinvigorate the Indian population? And the answer was, put them back on the reservation. Let them be tribes again. Let them be cultural groups. So the Indian Reorganization Act is going to undo everything the Dawes Act did. Okay? It's going to resurrect Indian culture by allowing them to live once again on the reservation in their tribal groups, practicing their religion and speaking their language. Okay? I can see a question coming out of that. A change over time type of thing. Short answer. Okay. In 1968, going forward from 68, Native Americans, and this is important, okay? Native Americans are going to take their cue from African Americans. They see the Black Panthers. They see the Weathermen. And now they want their own radical group. And it's called the American Indian Movement. Remember, they are a racial group just like African Americans are. So they're going to do some of the same things, especially with the Black Panthers, okay? These are the ones that took over Alcatraz. They seized Alcatraz. They went up to Wounded Knee and held it for a while, okay? So the American Indian Movement was founded by Dennis Banks, okay? And they are still around today. They're still around today, okay? This is kind of something to keep in mind. When you have an oppressed demographic in America, whether it's African Americans, Native Americans, women, okay? Remember, women aren't a minority, they are a demographic, okay? Look at what happens when they want their rights, that they always form a group to represent them, okay? African Americans will have the NAACP, later on the Black Panthers, Dr. King. Women will have the National Organization for Women. They've got the American Indian Movement. That's kind of an important trend. What they're doing here is taking advantage of what the Constitution gives them. They have a right to organize and protest on their own behalf. Not every country in the world has that right. So one point that you can make that points out the complexity of this is that when demographic groups in America want to protest on behalf of themselves, no matter who it is, okay, our Constitution allows that. Our Constitution gives them what they need to do that, okay? So when people do things like that, the only thing they do that is extra constitutional is fire guns and shoot people, okay? But the right to represent yourself, okay, is embedded in our Constitution as part of what we call American exceptionalism. Kind of cool. Okay, this is just Wounded Knee. BIA stands for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which was corrupt. This is when they go and they occupy Wounded Knee, which has spiritual significance to them. 1975 under Jimmy Carter. Carter is going to take the Reorganization Act one step further. Under the Reorganization Act, all Indian reservations were controlled by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, okay, a bureaucracy in Washington. When Carter comes in, he's going to eliminate the Bureau of Indian Affairs and say, reservations, govern yourself. That's what it means by self-determination. So the Self-Determination Act is going to allow Native Americans to govern themselves, however they want to. It's really interesting if you ever get a chance to go to an Indian reservation, okay? Several times we visited one in South Florida, okay? When you go to the Miccosukee Reservation down there, you have to have a passport. Okay? You can get one there at the office. It's not a U.S. passport, but a passport that lets you enter their sovereign nation. And you got to be out by dark. They let you stay overnight. Okay? And the reason is, that's their way of saying we are a sovereign nation. We govern ourselves. These are our laws. And just because you're white doesn't mean you can violate them. Okay? It's an expression of that. A lot of reservations are like that. One of my former students, one of my best students I ever had, when she got out, she did her master's work at Yale. And when she got out, she decided to go into Teach for America for a few years. So she taught on a reservation in New Mexico. It was a Navajo reservation. And in fact, she tried to get me to go there with her. I thought about it for a while. And she would write me back and tell me about these types of things. And she would tell me about how when something came up in the nearby town and everything, that they would hold a council there. And it was weird to watch how Native American council and modern American democracy welded together like that. And again, just like there, if you're white and you're coming on the reservation, you have to have a permit. You can't just roll on the reservation and stay there. If you're white and you're on the reservation, you are an immigrant, okay? And you can't move on to these things. And that's okay. All right. That is Native Americans, okay? We're going to take